Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Zinc Answers webcast series. My name is Kristen Wells and I'll be moderating today's webcast. We're going to be doing a deep dive into Zinc's communication analytics. We're going to go through how this data can be leveraged to improve both communications and operations. To help me do this, I'm joined by Jim Thomas. He is our Principal Solutions Consultant, and he's going to walk us through a demo of the different types of analytics. Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kristen. So for today's session, we have an agenda focused on three main areas. The first thing we want to talk about is in-app visibility. So in the application, how that data gets generated for reporting. So we'll take a look at date stamps and user attributes that all drive how we can report. As well as we'll take a look at broadcast and broadcast analytics. So when you're pushing information out to a group of users, the ability to see who received that and who clicked through to additional detail. The next section is around usage analytics. So what we want in Zinc is to make sure that employees are engaged and using the application. So we'll focus on membership. So who's a part of your organization, who's signed up and logged on. Activity and groups. So where is the communication happening? As well as a network view, which shows you graphically who's talking to whom. The last section we'll talk about is what we call business analytics. And this is the ability to dig a little deeper and start to overlay Zinc data with your own data. So we'll take a look at a couple of reports we've built around deeper user detail, as well as hotline analytics. And then we'll also take a view to an example of an ad hoc or a mixed source analytics where we're mixing data from both Zinc and some of your backend systems. So the first thing we'll do is jump into the Zinc application and take a look at how that data is generated. So we've got my iPhone here. I'm going to go ahead and log on to Zinc. When I do that, the first thing that pops up is this broadcast message. So in this example, a new safety harness has been delivered, and we want to make sure that everybody knows there's a new version of that safety harness. We want to push that information out. So what we do with broadcast is we take over the entire screen so that you can't move into the application until you acknowledge this broadcast. And so this is really one-way outbound communication with the ability to send text, pictures, as well as hyperlinks. See that I've clicked through into Capital Safety to see the details of this harness. I'll go ahead and click done, and now I'm sitting on my broadcast page. You've got a history of broadcasts here as well, so we've got all the detail of any of those that have been sent over time. Aside from broadcast, we also want to talk a bit about conversations. So in the lower left corner here, I'll go ahead and tap on the Conversations tab, and you can see here conversations within groups. So in this example, the Southeast Field Service team has a group where they talk among themselves, and also I've got a one-to-one conversation going with my manager. So if I tap on that conversation with my manager, I can see the detail there. And the idea with Zinc, and a quick overview of the application in general, is that we want to give you multiple ways to communicate. So at the bottom here, I can tap and type a message. So we've got the ability to send text. I can take a photo. I can grab a photo from my camera roll. I can share a file, including any connections to third-party file storage systems. I can send audio, as well as I can share my location. All of that detail in the conversation is time-stamped, so we know who sent it and when they sent it. We can also see for any of these things, did the person that I sent it to see that conversation? The idea with all-mode communication is that a lot of that texting and sharing of information can take you so far, but at a certain point, you might want to escalate the conversation to actually speak to somebody. So at a point where you can't text as much, you might start a phone call, a video conference, or a push-to-talk conversation. And each one of those will also be recorded in the logs. So we've got a history of when that communication happened. I'm going to go ahead and click back and click into the Southeast Field Service team. And so here you can see people mentioned, messages sent back and forth, a thumbs up delivered. If we scroll up through there, we can see all of that history. So who has done what when is all recorded in the system. In addition to the information that is captured in a conversation thread, we also want to see details about individual users. So if I click on Amy, I can see her user record. One of the things that's important for analytics is making sure that we can start to slice and dice that information by the types of users on the system. So in this example, Amy is set into a role of service engineer. She's on a specific service team, and she has certain skills. If I tap on the More button, I can see some additional details about Amy. So you'll see these later in the applications, in the analytics application, so that you can start to spin that data by any one of these attributes. These attributes are also used in broadcasting as well. So if we wanted to broadcast more narrowly to a specific type of user or to a specific role, we can push that broadcast out and find all of the service engineers, for example. So the data in here is really what drives the analytics. And so we'll transition away from the application and into the analytics backend and take a little bit of a look at some of those analytics. So the first thing we'll look at are usage analytics, and I'm going to go ahead and switch into the application. You'll notice that when I switch to the browser view, I also get that same broadcast popping up. I'll just go ahead and close out on it. So the view that we saw from the mobile app is the same view that you see in the browser. The ability in the browser as well, as an administrative user, you can go into your settings and drill into the Zinc admin, and that's where we'll spend most of our time today. So the first thing we'll look at in the Zinc admin is the broadcast tab. And so we've got all of the broadcasts that have previously been sent. As a user and a sender of broadcasts, I have the ability to see my own broadcasts. As an organizational admin, I can see everybody's broadcast. And when I click into any one of these, for example, the one that just came across at 10 a.m. this morning, I can see the details that were sent, but I can also see of the 18 recipients, one of those has opened it, and also one of those has clicked through. And at the bottom here, we have all the detail of who that was delivered to, as well as who saw that and who clicked through and when they did it. And so this gives you a good way to see when you're pushing important information out to the field, did it get through to the team? Did it not get through to certain people, and are those people that you might need to follow up with and rebroadcast to them? So broadcast analytics is an example of in-app analytics accessible to all of the users in the system. Anybody that is allowed to send a broadcast also has the visibility of that analytics. The next thing that we'll look at in terms of our demo flow are some usage analytics. So we're going to go through views for membership, activity, groups, and the network. The view for analytics is a drop-down for each one of the types of analytics, as well as a time span. So you can look at 7 days, 6 weeks, 12 months, or all of the time, as well as the ability to segment on those users. So any of those attributes that we have on the user, you can go ahead and select there as well. So in our view here, we can see that we've got 63 registered users and 9 pending invitations. In the graphic here as well, you can see over time that those 9 people were added and haven't logged on. So this gives you a good view to who's making use of the application and maybe who isn't on board just yet. You can break that down by how many have been registered. You can also consider attrition by seeing how many people have been removed, so what people have left the org as well. And at the bottom of this view, we have all of the detail that drove those graphics above. So all of the user detail is available here. We can have some of those skills and roles information stored here as well, and you can sort on any one of these headers or search across all of this information in the application. So if you're looking for a specific user that maybe isn't on board, you can go ahead and search their name, for example, Josh, and scroll down and find Josh. Additionally, for all of the analytics that we drive in the system, we can export that information as well. So anything that you've got available here, you can go ahead and export and push that out to a CSV file and use it in an existing analytics application or manage it in Excel. So the next thing we'll take a look at beyond membership is activity. So when we look at activity, it's the same view across the top. We've got our activity selected, our time frame, as well as our segment, and also here the button that shows you the ability to export all of that data. And so we see here, week by week, all of the activity that's occurred by type of activity. So in this example, we're showing what type of communication it was. Are we using text primarily? Are we sharing locations? Are we sharing audio files? How is the app being used is the view here. So we can see that from a messaging standpoint. Also from a calling standpoint, we can see how many video calls, voice over IP, or phone calls are being made. We also see some aggregate numbers and averages by user in this view as well. And then we've got the ability for the users that have communicated over the previous 6 weeks to be able to see exactly who are my heaviest users. And the idea here is that we want to see who are the people that are using the application heavily and what are they getting out of it so that we can share that information with other users to make sure that they're using it in the same way and getting the same value out of communicating within the organization. That view can also be seen by segmenting the view. And so the next view we'll take a look at is that same activity report, but now segmented on role. So for the different types of roles we have out there, service managers, service engineers, or technicians, who are my heavy users over time? So in this case, we can see that our service managers and our service technicians make up the bulk of our communication. Same idea with calls. That same report that we saw previously that was generally by week, now we're looking at it by role. So which ones are making more phone calls, which ones are doing more messaging. And again, that same level of detail at the bottom there that you can export to do some additional reporting on is the detailed grid view. So in addition to activity in general, we also want to see how users are communicating within groups. So our view here for groups over the previous 6 weeks shows us both official groups. And so in Zinc, an official group is a group that is managed by our customer centrally. So they decide who is allowed in and who gets kicked out of that group and what is the scope of that group. As well as we have unofficial groups, which is an ad hoc group created between one or several people to discuss a specific context subject. And so the idea there is that if you have a Southeast team that we saw, they would be managed by their manager. People would come and go as they move in and out of that organization. But you might also have a specific installation or a specific job that is a long period of time. And for that job, we would create an unofficial group and allow communication around that subject. But over time, it may go away and be less used. So our view here shows the top 25 groups by message volume. So you can see where all the activity is in the system. You've got a view here that shows a dot, which is the size of the users within a group, as well as the recency left to right. So the further to the right, the more recently it's been used. And the higher up in the grid it is the more messages sent. So this gives you a good visual to say, these are the groups that have the most activity and the most recent activity. And so if you see groups starting to trail off, you might ask yourself, is this a group that I still want to maintain and manage in the system, or could it be collapsed into another group? So that's from an official group standpoint. So those are the ones, again, managed by the customer or by the company. And then we also have ad hoc groups. So these are the ones that users create themselves. And you've got some visibility into that as well to see what groups have been created, and is that a group that is valuable enough to be managed as an official group and maybe bringing more people into the fold so that they've got benefit of the communication going on in that group. As well, in the groups view, we can see all the groups created, so named, official, or unnamed groups. And we can also see, again, a grid view of all of the detail of things that have been created, the volume of messages, how many members are in those groups. Again, all of this information available to be exported. And so the idea with groups is that we want to see in which groups are users communicating. Should that unofficial group turn into an official group and start to be centrally managed so that we can share that information with more users? And then also, which group should I dig into to see what's being discussed? So if there is a group out there and it's very active, you might want to jump into it as an admin, take a look around and see what's going on in that group and see what that means for your business. The next view we'll take a look at, and this is one that we'll do via slide instead of in the system directly because of the amount of data that it takes to drive a good graph like this. And so this spider chart or this network chart shows a dot for each person or each user that is communicating in the application, as well as gray lines, and the thickness of the gray line depends on how much communication there is between those 2 points or those two users. And so it shows you a network view of all the users and their communication. So you can see little starbursts where it's most likely a manager speaking to their subordinates, but also lots of central points who might be communicating out. So this might be a senior manager who's pushing out broadcasts or information across multiple groups to multiple people. And what this can tell you is how are your users using the application? So who are my heavy users? What are the point-to-point communications happening? But also you can see there are some green dots in the upper left and the upper right that aren't connected to anything. So now I've got some outliers here. And so this could potentially be in a field service organization, somebody who is senior and doesn't necessarily need the support of the communication application, and they are rolling solo. It could be someone who needs some training and needs some help getting going on the application. But we want to look at those people and decide, are they somebody that has valuable information to share, and should we bring them into the groups and bring them into the fold so that they can act as an expert potentially to support other folks in the field? The next section we'll look at is business analytics. And so here we're going to look at 3 different reports. We'll take a look at a user detail report, which is essentially a deeper dive into an individual user. We'll take a look at hotline analytics, and then also this idea of mixed source analytics. So bringing data in and combining it between 2 different systems. So the first report we'll take a look at is this user report. You'll notice that I'm scrolled down a little bit on this one. This report is one that is not in the standard application. It is available to our customers, but we realize that there are some privacy concerns about really digging deeply into an individual user's communication. So we rely on our customers to decide what's appropriate for them. We do treat Zinc much like you would treat email in the sense that it is a corporate communications tool, so it should be used appropriately as such. But the view here shows a lot of detail about an individual user, the 1,000 messages that this person has sent in 90 days, broken down by types of messages, so text versus thumbs up versus images sent, all of that volume over time. So in this case, we can see a bit of a spike in the week of the 30th. All of the details around the calls, how many they've joined, how many they've done over the last 90 days, all of the information about when they're communicating as well. So in this case, we've got by date and by time of day when the activity is. And so this allows us to see when there's a lot of communication, when are people most likely using the application, and that can start to drive into why they're using it. So if there's a bunch of communication at the start of the day, maybe that's just to get them aligned, but then where are they starting to ask questions and where are they starting to, in this example, take their afternoon dispatch, right? So we see a lot of communication after the morning dispatch or the morning job is done, communicating back to get the afternoon dispatch. Further down in here, we have more detail about exactly into which groups they're communicating, as well as the point-to-point or person-to-person communication links as well. So we can see essentially who is their closest colleague or who is their best friend in the organization. So one of the things that we are digging into with our data is starting to look at the impact of communication on retention. So are users that don't communicate with other employees, so talking about deskless workers, so if they don't have a connection to the organization and they're working solo, are they more of a risk for attrition? So we want visibility into that data to say, are people that communicate well, people that are engaged and going to stay with the company long term? The next view that we'll take a look at beyond the user view is this idea of a hotline report. And so in Zinc, hotlines are an ability to message into a group. And so think of this group as level 2 support, product line X support, maybe a network operations center, where there are a group of experts managing the inbound communication into that group. But as a user, you don't necessarily need to know who's in that group. You just need to know that you have a question about a certain subject and you can push it into that group. So we want to kind of get users away from this idea of phoning a friend and then maybe that friend tells them who actually has the answer. We want to make it easy for anybody in the organization to ask a question and find the experts, even if they don't know specifically who that expert is. What we typically see in this area for field organizations is it's either very informal with phone calls and emails into groups, or it's more formal with a full-blown ticketing system where you have to put a request in. And what we've seen in those 2 scenarios is that in the former, with email and text, the information maybe isn't being asked of the proper person and also isn't shared more broadly with the organization. In the latter, with a full-blown ticketing system, we find that there's just a little bit too much overhead for people to really record the information and record the things that happen. So with hotlines, we're trying to give you the kind of frictionless user experience of a messaging application, but still give you good reporting about what's happened in terms of supporting user requests from the field. And so if we look at this report here, we can see details about request volume. So how much is coming in on a daily basis. And this is a master tech hotline. So this is essentially support for field technicians. For each one of those requests aggregated at a daily level, we can see how quickly did the expert teams respond to the request, how quickly did they resolve that, and then what was the total interaction time for that request. So all of that trending over time. We can also start to break that down by date to say, what is the maximum response time? What is the median? How does it fall into different quartiles? So we give you a lot of good information of plotting each one of those interactions into a view here to say, when am I hitting spikes in demand? So are there certain times of day or certain days of the week that drive more requests? Same kind of view that we saw above, instead of daily, in this case weekly. So see those aggregated up at a slightly higher level. And that same view for median request response time by week instead of by day. All of that information about when people jump into and out of of these support conversations is recorded in here. So you see each one of these plot points for this is one that's valuable in terms of determining when you should staff those hotlines. And so we can see by hour of the day and day of the week, where are my hotspots? Where is the spike in activity driving maybe a need for additional support manning that hotline? And so in this example, you can see that Friday has some spikes mid-afternoon. So that might be a time that you want to make sure that you're getting enough support to ensure that those resolution times and those initial response times are as fast as possible. Additionally, you can see the response time by time of day as well. So how long does it take to respond based on the time of day? Again, good visibility into the demand of the requests from the field. Additionally, is there an impact of the volume of requests on the response time? So if I get a lot of requests, does it take me longer to respond to them? And so you can start to see day over day any kind of anomalies here. So in this case, very few requests, but it took a long time to get at it on this Friday. And so what does that mean to the business? Why was that such a slow response? And so how can we essentially use this information to make sure that we're supporting the field in a better way so that we're driving down mean time to service and driving down that idle time? Same idea for interaction time versus request volume, and then request response times daily by hour. So all of this detail at any level of granularity that's interesting to you. This one has been anonymized, but it is also able to be viewed by owner. And so in this case, typically what you would see is an email address here, but you can see for each owner who's doing the most work in terms of support, how many requests have they had over time. And then we can also see response times by the people handling those requests as well. So who turns these around quickly, who maybe isn't providing the same level of support as some of the other folks in the organization. And so it gives you a chance to dig in and say, is there opportunity for training? Same visibility from interaction times and resolution times. And then also the ability to see this by technician or by field resource. So how many requests have come in from each person in the field? And so in this example, you can see this person at the front of the queue here, at the front of the list, has more requests than almost everybody else. The first question that I would have is why? Are they working harder than everybody else, or do they not know what everybody else knows and they can't do something on their own necessarily? And so this is good visibility into the outliers in the data. And also we can see who's asking the hard questions. So in this case, the request interaction time by field tech shows which ones are quickly resolved versus which ones take a little more effort to resolve. The last view that we'll take a look at in the slide is an example of the intersection of communications data with work order data. And so in this Gantt chart view, you see each block of time as a work order or a job that a technician was on. And each of the black hash marks is communication that occurred by that user at the same time. So we overlay the communication information on the Gantt chart view of work orders. And what that lets us dig into a little bit is the idea that, are there certain products that are being worked on in the field that drive more communication? Are there certain types of jobs that always require more communication? Are installations driving more chatter and more conversation than a repair? And so with the attributes of the work order and all the details that we know about the work order and the communication patterns, we can start to say, maybe there's a need for training on a specific product line. Maybe there's a need for additional support. Maybe this is something that goes all the way back to engineering to change the product to make it more serviceable. And so this is a great way to start to intersect who's talking with the data that drives how your business works. And the idea with this is that we want to drive the business forward with communication, but we also want to say, where is there communication happening that might give us an opportunity to improve the business? A quick summary in terms of the three areas that we've gone through. At the application level, the important thing to take away is that every interaction, every message, every phone call generates that data of who was making that call or who sent that message, as well as when they did that. Then we start to use that in the usage analytics to say, are you getting the value out of Zinc? Are your users adopting the solution and driving communication? And who are your stars in terms of communication? And how can we start to take a picture of what they're doing and start to drive that kind of behavior into the rest of the organization? And then the last piece there is that we want to start to see how can we mix this data with existing business data to drive continuous improvement in your business. So if there is something that's a bit of an anomaly in terms of the communications, what does that mean for your business? And so this is where we work with our communication data, push that over and mix it together with your existing business data and use that to take a look at opportunities for improvement. A general summary is that when Zinc talks about connecting deskless workers, our real goal is to ensure that people get quick, accurate answers to both speed the completion of field work and to ensure that that work is done correctly and safely while also engaging with their peers. So analytics over top of that allows us to show where and how users communicate to give our customers some insight into the opportunities and opportunities for business improvement. So we've got some contact information up here on the screen as well. So if you would like a deeper dive or a more bespoke demo of Zinc, go to zinc.it/demo, or feel free to give us a phone call and we can set that up as well. So at this point, we'll transition over to questions that have come across throughout the webinar.
All right. Thank you, Jim. We have just a couple questions that we can answer here. Let's see. One I have is, can you report on the content of the messages?
So yes, the short answer is yes. We have the detail of all the text that was sent in the messages. We don't expose it in the standard reporting, but all of that is available so that if you wanted to do a word cloud type report, or if you wanted to push it through an AI tool to look at some sentiment analysis, all of that data is available and can be exported to you, or we can manage that on your behalf. By default, Zinc doesn't look at that data unless given permission by our customers.
Great. We have two more. We got, who owns this data?
Yeah, so the question about who owns the data, very simply, it's your data. You decide in the system when you want to purge it out, and you can also have that exported out to your own data lake if you so desire. But it is not Zinc data, it is all owned by our customer.
All right, and then for someone who's using Zinc, who has access to their organization's data?
Yeah, so Zinc does include profile-based security. So based on your role in the organization, you will have access to different levels of data. So org admins, so the user that I was in there as was an org admin, has visibility to everything in there. The only differentiating from a reporting perspective is that broadcasters who aren't org admins can see their broadcast analytics, but they can't see all of the other broadcast analytics. So we control the scope of visibility based on your role in the organization.
Great. Thanks everyone for listening, and if you have any further questions, want to reach out, you can visit those links or give us a call. Thank you.